Right, good afternoon everyone. I'm just going to talk, hopefully within 10 minutes, around two areas, really about South African experience that we've had within Centica over the last couple of years. I'm going to try and weave in as well a little bit around how we are trying to upskill, educate, call it what you will, our relationship managers in terms of dealing with suppliers and outsourcers, etc., going through. I'm not going to talk much about this. Basically, British Gas Centrica, we're the largest energy supplier in the UK, upstream business, just taken on some interesting nuclear energy assets. Downstream, I guess one of the big areas we've got moving forward is smart metering. It's one of the most exciting innovations in that marketplace, and it has repercussions for what we do around some of our outsourcing elements as well. Just a very quick picture in terms of some of our global locations for India. We've got about 3,000 FTE now outsourced into various elements of BPO, HR, etc. in India. In other areas, other outsourced locations, some nearshore in Northern Ireland, several providers in Europe, and as I say, we'll talk a little bit more about the South African experience as we go along. Our outsourcing experience or journey has been quite, I guess, a rapid one really, starting off in about 2003, 2004, with us moving into, I guess, fairly dramatic for us at the time, looking at voice services for our telecom business, and then very quickly taking the decision in 2004 to move into back office services and dual supplying that in India, and those relationships continue. The outbound service we put in 2006, HR outsource we've moved into as well, and then effectively you see as we go along the sort of value curve, we've moved more and more areas into outsourcing over the last few years. We probably haven't been outsourcing as long as the BBC, I suspect, but we certainly, in terms of other areas, you know, we've been outsourcing metering, meter reading, those types of areas probably for about 20 years now. Okay, so just a little bit about South Africa. We obviously had done a lot of work around back office. We decided that there were some elements of voice that we could move out, or we wanted to move out to an offshore location. Now this was all set against an interesting dilemma within our business that says, effectively, we'd made it quite public that we didn't want to go out and put voice offshore effectively. You know, British Gas is in the brand, all those types of issues come into play. So what we looked at was stuff effectively around the peripherals, so low-end transactional calls, stuff that comes off IVR, etc. as well. And fairly uniquely in terms of our case, we looked at the country first. So we looked at which countries, in terms of culture, capabilities, etc., felt that they met our needs and our criteria better than any others. We looked effectively at the Philippines, we looked at South Africa, and we baselined that against our experience in India. And this really just gives a picture of some of the decision criteria layers that we put into place there. So really looking at the whole cost, social, political elements, looking at locations in terms of sustainability, and then having done that, moved down into the supplier layer and really did a deep dive around, you know, what we're looking for there. We track about 30 countries on an ongoing basis at a high level, but actually probably look at about 6 or 7 countries in great depth around a number of different criteria on an ongoing basis. One of the things we've developed as part of our toolkit really to make these decisions is effectively looking at the cultural checklist, and we've developed an academy now within the business, recognising that we've got about £500 million spend in outsourcing with about 25 different relationships, probably about 200 to 300 different relationship managers. We came, to, I guess, to the conclusion pretty quickly as we go through our journey that we really needed to upskill these guys, and so we developed an academy over the last 4 years, a program called Managing Effective Partner Relationships, which effectively gives those guys the tools and the input they need to get a consistent approach around how we manage our outsourcing people going forward. This checklist is one of them, effectively. So it's looking at pre- and post-contractual issues around how we should deal with culture. And it's not the be-all and end-all. You know, you can take this and kind of adapt it and look at it in different ways. But the idea is to raise the profile of culture, for instance, as one of the key elements around relationships in the business. So that program now has had about, I think, about 150 people through it over the last 4 years, and it's a very successful program. We talked earlier on, or I think in the last presentation, about the kind of, you know, the areas that we must have, or the areas we're looking for within suppliers, etc. And this is what we look at. the must-have criteria around what we're looking for in partners. Culture is one of them, as I've mentioned. Vision is very much at the top in terms of trying to share the long-term vision of both partners. Impact in terms of clearly the economics, but also looking at effectively how do we use that relationship to grow shareholder value effectively, and that's what we've tried to do with our outsourcing organisations in the past. Intimacy, I think one of the things we've learned in terms of developing our offshore programme is that you need to spend a lot of time with your suppliers. You need to actually spend the time to get to know them, to understand effectively what makes them tick. And part of the programme we've put together, that I mentioned earlier on, is very much about getting our relationship managers to effectively look at the suppliers and think about what they're thinking about. So put themselves in their shoes. And actually, once you do that, then anything's possible, I guess. But it's been very enlightening, I think, for a number of people that's been through that programme in terms of understanding the kind of, if you like, the issues that are in each party's minds and how you deal with them as you go through the process. Okay, a little bit back to South Africa in terms of some of the evaluation process that we've gone through there. And this was around voice skills. So looking at a whole raft of different things. And we actually sat down with a lot of organisations and listened into calls, etc., going forward. Verbal lollipops, for anyone who wants to know, is effectively little sweeteners that are put into the conversation with a customer that kind of just, tickles their tummy, just makes them feel good. And actually in South Africa, that was very, very pertinent. It came out quite a lot, actually. They do that very, very well indeed. I'm not going to deal with that. Hills and mountains, working in South Africa. I think our experience so far today has been good. I think one of the key issues that we've recognised is the whole post-benefit appraisal process. Because I think when we went into this, we went in with a very small organisation, and we took the risk in terms of the exchange rate. When we went into that, it was 16 rand to the pound. It's now something around about 11.5. So there have been some issues there about the business case ongoing, making sure that washes its face. But we're obviously looking at other areas now, ways of potentially mitigating that impact. Supplier choice and scale in South Africa is getting better. It hasn't been great. Certainly when we went in about 2 years ago, there were a handful of major suppliers there, but I think that's changing. The international BPO area is still quite small, I think, in comparison to domestic. Telephony costs are an ongoing issue, really. I think South Africa, from our perspective, is still pretty uncompetitive in that particular area. But they are looking at ways of getting that scenario sorted. And I think as the whole industry starts to deregulate and a bit more competition comes in, I think we'll see the costs coming down. Management talent, that's not just about South Africa, that's kind of wherever you go, I think, to a certain extent, certainly in India as well. There is an issue with middle management within South Africa, but we have found actually that the guys that are there are very good, very innovative, and actually do generate ideas coming forward, which I think is something that we haven't seen particularly in the Indian setups. Security, again, wherever you go, that tends to be an issue. We haven't seen anything particularly out of the ordinary within South Africa. It's a case of understanding where the risks are and making sure you mitigate them ongoing. Tier 1, Tier 2 locations choice, again, not much of that going on, but we have looked at other areas. We're in Joburg at the moment, but we have looked at Cape Town and we are looking at KZN as well, where there are some potential price differentials, but equally other issues around capabilities and talent, etc. Accessing grants. There's a big incentive program within South Africa. It's been one of the big issues that we've had effectively in terms of accessing those grants. The infrastructure grants you can get pretty quickly. The education grants, just a word of warning, take forever. So, experience to date, I think it's been a good one. We've started off with 85 agents. We're tracking up to now 250. I think the quality of the agent is good. The performance is comparable to UK benchmark sites, but I think a word of caution on that was at the low-end transactional side. As we've moved up through the value chain, I think we've seen some challenges there in terms of making sure that we tie performance down, which has meant we've had to put more effort into it as well. Good middle management layer, but I think employee engagement is one of the areas that we do need to work on as well. And that's it. Thank you.